So a lot of people have a lot to say when it comes to studying. What to do, what not to do. Well, today we're going to break down what things I've done and how that's helped me. This is how most people think their study is going. But it's probably more like this.
Please, no more Legos or fire.
No more Legos, fine. But the first thing that we need to do is work out what I've actually tried. And the first thing that everyone always tries is they go to the textbooks, because that's what we're told. We're told that textbooks contain all the information for the specific topics that we're after. However, you might actually start to question how useful they are in terms of actually studying. But in terms of the actual study technique, reading a textbook is simply, I think, a waste of time. Reading something and expecting to understand it, remember it, and then explain it to other people is quite a naive thing. You're not testing the concepts that you're learning in an active way. So that's why I think reading textbook is very passive, and I think it's good for an overview, but it doesn't really get down into the nitty-gritty in terms of actually understanding and applying the concepts that you're trying to learn. So I think we can agree that reading textbooks is probably not the best way to study. On to number 2. So I think this next one I actually did for quite a while, especially in school and in first year uni. That's when I first started to really get into this technique. Look, writing notes is good. Don't get me wrong, writing the note itself is one of the best ways to actually understand a concept. And the process of doing it is actually really good at retaining knowledge. I would say you probably remember 80–85% of the stuff that you write down off by heart. And I would do this to revise for exams all the time. And it was a super useful method. Where it actually falls down in terms of study is a few different things. The first thing is that it's really tricky to read your own writing. I mean, I have atrocious handwriting, and that's something I need to work on, of course. I don't know how they gave me my pen license in I think it was year 4. There was one person, I think his name was what was his name? Ivan, if you're watching. You were the first one to get it in year 3 that I'd ever heard of. I was trying to get my pen license so hard, and I looked at my handwriting, I was like, come on, this is good. It was terrible, terrible handwriting. Okay, let's get back to the story. Where it falls down is that it's actually super time consuming, and I think storage and transportability, if that's even a word. It's gonna be word of the year this year. Maybe next year. Yeah, I don't know what the word of the year this is. Maybe that, I don't know when they decide that actually. So it's good in the moment that you're doing it, but when you need to revise, what are you gonna do? Read your notes? Well, we're back to step 1, and we know that that didn't really work that well. So you'd have to rewrite your own notes. So that's handwriting your own notes. On to number 3. Next 2, I'm gonna do really quick. The third one is writing your notes on the computer, which is essentially the same as number 2, but I think it's less effective. It's probably better in terms of being able to transport your notes, and in terms of security, you're not gonna lose it as easily. For number 2 and 3, it might be great at the time that you're doing it, but what's the repeatability of that study? If you want to revise again closer to the exam date, maybe 2 or 3 weeks out, what's your process going to be then? I'm going to go like this. Actually, you know what? I'm going to sit down. Too tired standing up. The next one was something that I sort of did at uni. Sometimes I remember having 6 or 7 lectures in one day. I would remember sometimes I would, rewatch these lectures at 1.5 times the normal speed. And yeah, occasionally the lecturer talks slow, Trying to skim through it and understand things at twice the speed is quite naive. Don't watch it on 2.5 times speed to get through it as quick as possible. You're just gonna re-watch it at some point anyways. Take your time, watch it at real-time speed. Don't bother speeding it up. All right, should we do, so what's that now? That's 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're on to number 5. All right, let's do number 5. I really tried to make it work for so long, and that is making flashcards. You know, I used a program called Quizlet, which is actually really good, but I just couldn't keep up with the pace and the volume of content at which to produce. So what I'd do is I'd get the lecture, I'd watch it, then I'd go back and rewatch that lecture, take notes in the forms of flashcards, or I would make them questions. And what I would do is I'd enter the question and I would put an answer on the other side. I would make these question answer pairs all down for lectures at a time. Like it was actually super useful and super helpful. And I think the question answer pairing to study is one of the most high yield things ever. It was just too much to do for one person. And it is possible. I did do it early on in my university study. I got some of the best grades ever. Geez, we've done a lot so far. Should we do number 6? All right, let's do it. Come. Come this way. Next one is designating what I call study days. The reason I don't like this one is that I think it puts too much pressure on the actual day itself to cram as much in as possible, and then you spend the next few days like recovering. You need to do it as frequently as possible, and you need to minimize the gaps. For those of you who work or have a full-time job, it's obviously harder. Even harder for those who actually have a family or even kids to look after. Whenever I was teaching or tutoring students, I would always draw them this graph, and it's like the forgetting curve. And it sort of starts out at the top, and you know, on the y-axis, that's your retention percentage, and then on the x-axis is time. And you start off when you first revise a concept at 100%. Say you do it really well, it's 100%. And then over time, that sort of drifts off. And that makes sense. Like, the trend is that the information is not going to be as important to you as it was when you first learnt it. So if you sort of, what I like to say, top up that knowledge, you know, you revise it again, it's you delve into this field called spaced repetition. And you know, this is actually one of the ways I probably like to revise, so it's probably more something I want to talk about later in the video. But I don't know, I guess we've arrived at it now. And if you think about it in terms of any skill you've ever done, you know, if you make a coffee every single morning, you understand the process, you understand the intricacies, because sometimes you do it slightly differently. You might burn the milk this time, you might use a different type of bean or something. I don't know, whatever your niche is, I don't really care. But you know, maybe it's just because I need a coffee, all right?
I need coffee, extra strong.
You know, if you do something every single day, you're just gonna get good at it, and you're gonna get really good at it. So it's the same principle with study. You know, if I made a coffee once every, 10 months, I'm not gonna be the best at making it, because I'm gonna forget how to do it. It makes sense. Yeah. Next one. You like how I come through the door there? That was pretty cool. Last one is trying to multitask and study at the same time. I find if you're trying to do 2 things at once, it's just proven. You do not have the capabilities to focus, on both things. You can do 2 things, but you might not do them to the best of your ability. Yeah, there are people who think they can multitask, and there's people who know that they can't multitask. That's just the way it is. So look, that's everything that I've tried. And that's really good. It's important to try a whole lot of things. But before we can understand what the best way to study is, we need to actually get down to what the point of the study is in the first place. We've got to really ask ourselves what the point of study is. And it all boils down to these 3 things. Does it help you remember? Does it help you understand? And does it help you apply the concepts that you're trying to learn? And really, if you can't do that, you need to actually ask yourself, what's the point? You might have a different technique that I haven't even talked about in this video today. And that's fine. I don't really mind if you choose your own technique, you do a combination of them. All I've done is I've studied for a long time, and I will continue to study. This is an ongoing process. It's not like I've completed study and that's it. I still have so many more exams, so many more interviews, so many more tests ahead of me, but you need to clarify your knowledge with different people. Whenever I was writing an essay at school, I had like an English tutor. I would send her my English essays, or we would go through it together. And apart from her, I'd also run it by my English teacher. And then I had an old English teacher who I'd also run by the essays with. There was essentially 4 different pairs of eyes overviewing my essay itself. And you got different perspectives from each one of those people. I didn't always take into consideration every little bit that they put in. And I think that's the thing with study. You want to pick up the best bit of advice from as many people as you can. And if you can put that together to make something work for you, then that's probably the best answer. I just wanted to share what I've learned over the past 13 years. It's been a lot of time. At the end of it, you need to reflect and you need to say, did it actually work or not? Did it help me achieve the goal? If it didn't, then it needs to be refined further. And I think that's the whole thing to take away from this, is that study is not a static thing. It's constantly changing, it's dynamic. Your life changes. You need to change your study to fit in your life and your schedule. Ask yourself those 3 questions. You can sort of build any study technique around it that's actually pretty worthwhile. So yeah, anyways, let's leave it there.